Welcome to Inflection Point Conversations. I'm Michelle Obeda, an art director at Shimahara Visual. This series emerged as a reaction to the highly disruptive AI revolution that's reached an inflection point within our industry. We hope to take a deep dive into this revolution. Join us. Today, I'm speaking with Dennis Allain. Dennis is an architect and illustrator who has been in the architectural profession since 1987. His work stands out as unique in the world of architectural visualization, balancing the use of digital painting tools of this era with a sensibility that is profoundly rooted in the traditional past. Most notably, his work includes The Fisherman, winning the Thematic and Members' Choice Award in 2022, and the critically acclaimed painting The Arthur V. McCarthy Memorial, which won the Hugh Ferris in 2006. He won his second Hugh Ferris Memorial Prize in 2020 for his work entitled Alone, earning him an international reputation as an innovative leader in the world of architectural design and illustration. Dennis's passions for art and design have always been a focus in his professional life. In 2004, he announced the creation of his new Boston-based design studio, dedicated to providing inspired architectural design and visionary illustration. In his spare time, Dennis produces highly creative and fantastic images using 3D, 2D, generative AI, which has seen great success online and in the ArchViz world at large. Welcome, Dennis.
You know, you can take a photograph of a sunset, but there's no such thing as the only beautiful sunset is the one that you're actually there staring at. I can't tell you how many times I've taken pictures of sunsets and they're like, "Oh, this isn't how I remembered it." So what I try to do is try to capture, how you remember something. Yeah. So I think in that regard, art has a huge advantage over, photorealism.
For sure.
The thing is, anybody can do photo, not anybody actually. It's a tough thing to achieve. It's almost like this what I'd almost consider like synthetic photography. There's some great photography out there, and there's actually some great 3D work out there that's very sort of somber and moody, almost just like a gorgeous photograph. But sometimes it's almost too theatrical, and I don't know, it's hard to describe, but I think that you try to find some sort of a niche that resonates with people, and you use that. I've tried to use that to keep my studio going.
So your explorations with generative AI images have also brought along a lot of the same theory in terms of the feeling, the emotion, the nostalgia as well. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got into that and how you're enjoying processes using Midjourney, for example?
Well, I started Midjourney looking into it like I started with all those past kind of mediums out of jealousy. I'd see an image like a year and a half ago, like, hey, I want to make one of those. Like, I looked at it and I just thought it was cool. I thought it was really interesting. How'd you do that? And like, well, you sign up for Midjourney. How do you do that? Well, you got to email David and hope that he sends you an invite, because it was very beta at the time. And I emailed him. I said, hey, I'm an architect. I'm really interested in your thing. And this was before he really got super popular. So he was answering emails, and he said, yeah, okay, you can be on the beta team, which it wasn't a special invitation. I mean, he was cranking through lots of people that were wanting to get in, but nonetheless, it was still kind of cool. I jumped in, asked some friends how you work this thing. And so it's all text prompt. And so you'd sit there and you'd think about sort of the words and the ideas that are rolling around in your own head when you think about being creative, and, type it in, you get something, and then you can add your own photos, you can add your own 3D model images, and then you can blend other things. So it can be, it's kind of like a copy of a copy of a copy. Trent Reznor, Nine Inch Nails, has a song where he talks about that. And so I don't know if that's good or bad necessarily, but there is lots of me in these things. So I don't, so for the moment, I'm enjoying experimenting with my thoughts, my poetry, photography, 3D models, old renderings, gluing them all together and kind of seeing what happens.
Yeah, a little bit like I mean, that sounds very much like your process before AI in terms of kind of like a 3D collage or like a 3D, 2D
Yeah.
collage, but now you've just brought in another medium. That's pretty cool. Um, so in your artistic, like in your artwork, you could see a lot of themes of like scaffolding and cocoons and webs and like dilapidated structures and things like that. I feel like that appears quite a lot in your images, and I'd love it if you could talk about like where that influence came from, or is that deliberate?
Oh, it's probably deliberate. That sort of uh, decay and rebirth, old and new, watercolor paintings with a brush and the computer. Like so many things in my life have kind of been part of that. Um, and when I was a little kid, I would go. My dad was an electrician, electrical contractor. When I was little, he'd take me on jobs from time to time. And back then, there were leather tanneries all over the place where I live, on the North Shore in Peabody, Danvers, Salem, Massachusetts. And I'd go into these old factories, and they were so cool. They were like spooky and kind of neat. Reminded me of like horror movies and things when I was in the 70s. I'm a little kid dating myself here. So, and you'd wander around, and like the little bits of light would come in, and the light would come through an old window and hit something, and you'd look at it and be this weird machine. You wouldn't know what it is. So there's some of that kind of in there. And then there's, um, growing up as a kid, like in science fiction, like in horror movies, monster movies, things like that. Um, Sort of art noir type of vibe. So moving ahead to like college and stuff, there was a lot of talk of like deconstructivism and sort of showing how something lives, by showing how it starts and how it ends. There's this book about synchronicity. I think it was David F. Peat. He wrote it, and one of his examples was a leaf. You'd have a leaf, and then he'd copy it a bunch of like 8 times in an array, and it would slowly decay till you just had the bones. And so there was this idea that you show the life of something by showing its whole life cycle. And so you get a
Yeah.
little bit of that. And then, with my work, there's a couple of pieces where it's, you might have like an old street scene, and then there's like a statue, like a Renaissance statue with rope all over it and stuff. It's almost kind of like man taking away art or wrapping it up or treating it like something that can just be moved around. So there's lots of that kind of message in my work all over the place. Symbolism of sort of beauty, or like a loss of religion, or a loss of like tradition, that kind of thing. It's not so much to lecture or preach or anything like that, but it's more just about, it just seems like it's just like a sexy subject to me. I like all that kind of machinery and stuff. It's just an aesthetic that I really like. And it can fall hand in hand with sort of it's like the new slickness of a new architecture versus an old kind of architecture. And they also, being in Venice, Italy, they take this scaffolding very seriously. Like in Europe,
Yeah.
it's like its own art form because it might be up for 5, 10 years, quite literally. So when I lived in Venice, some of that really struck me as being awesome. It was also an opportunity to study shadows and shape, how shadows cascade over these webs of things. And so it's all that kind of stuff all mashed together that sort of comes up and out of my work from time to time, a lot of times.
Yeah, that's beautiful. How much do the influences of those influence the prompts that you use, for example, if you're making these images in AI?
Oh, well, AI is very kind of a different animal. Like in my traditional work is 3D and Photoshop, which is silly to say it's traditional, but that's sort of how I work. And so I'll see an image of something. Like there was one time where I saw like a small church painting in a pamphlet on Cape Cod, and it was like a bad photograph. And I looked at it, and it had like a telephone pole in it. And so like I started thinking about how this whole technology over religion, blah, blah, blah. So a spark will happen, and then I'll start building something that I can look around, and then I will take it and then paint on top of it to add atmosphere and nuance. Now with AI, you see images, or you took a photograph of a sunset, and then that sparks an idea, or you'll have some old photos from Venice, and you'll wonder, what does it look like when you collapse them together? And then what happens if you say make it look like Russian Impressionism from the 1920s, and then you follow that for prompts and things, but then that dies, it doesn't look that good, and then you say, all right, well, now blend one of my old models. Like I'll have before I do a painting, I'll have model shots, I'll have stills of tests. So I'll take that test in, blend it with the sunset, look at it, add words, Lost in the Woods, or I'll find an Edgar Allan Poe poem. I'll take pieces of literature or something, add it in, see what comes out of it. And really I don't I either, with Midjourney, you get like 4. Have you ever worked with Midjourney?
Yes.
So you get like the 4 images. If I don't like any of those, then I start over. Like I don't keep doing the variations of that usually. It's like I'll either kind of know or I won't. And so I usually find one that I like and then update it, and then or upscale it, and then I'll use that and save that as something that I might post. So all the other stuff I don't keep it all. I just save that. So it's really a culmination of all those things. And I avoid artists that I know or like I don't use, my contemporaries or any, because I want to, there's that weird ethical thing that's going on, and I still don't have an answer to that. But what I try to do, and I like hearing what you mentioned, I'm flattered and I appreciate that my style does sort of seem somehow to come through, which is great, because that's what, and it's, it's subject matter, it's how I see things. And then I'm a miserable writer, but I write out what I think I see, and then it comes to life, and then I might blend it again and bring it, and then I'll either land on something or I won't.
Yeah. So how much control do you feel you have over the AI images?
Not a lot. Like it's the spark, and that's what's interesting, whether it's definitely still really early. If I see something that pops up that I worked on and it looks cool, I'll save it. And if I think it really looks cool, I'll post it on Instagram. I think in August I have somewhere like 600 images that I liked and I saved.
Yeah.
And that I think it could be contenders. In that month, I probably posted 15 of them. So there's definitely lots of stuff that, old buildings, new buildings, underwater, above water, shiny surface. And then also I'll take those, and I'm not just satisfied with those. I'll take those, bring them in, camera map them in Cinema 4D, add more 3D models to it, then bring it back out of there, put it in Photoshop, and then paint on top of that. So it's just like 3D Studio
It's not
Max.
a straight output.
Yeah, don't just take what the renderer gives you. Renderer is in like V-Ray or something like that, or whatever, Arnold. Get some ideas, and then, like I said, I would do some camera mapping. I did one in particular that comes to mind, where I added a bridge to it that I built in 3D, and then took all that, brought it into Photoshop, and then added a search party in the water looking around for some abandoned car or something like that. And so you don't just take it for what it is, try to make it your own and add some authorship to it. I mean,
yeah,
I think I said this in Instagram, it's like, there's a remarkably hollow feeling of just like clicking a button, waiting for something to come up that's like a red tree or something with a mountain in the background. There's still good and bad images. And I think no matter what we do as a human race, there's still going to be 10% awesome, you know, 70% is going to be okay, and 20% is going to be awful. So my hope is to find something that's kind of cool. And also part of your question is I don't have a lot of control over it. That's the way I can have control over it, is to pull it out. But even the developer, David, said he doesn't want a lot of control because he doesn't want it to fall into the hands of art directors that are just running around pointing their finger. Oh, change that soap, or oh, make that window a Palladian. Don't make it a casement. Stuff like that, because you want to, his sense is to maintain spontaneity and creativity. And to that end, I think I agree with him. So it's not overly directable.
Yeah. What do you think the limitations are, particularly in terms of like the data sets? Like when you're typing in prompts, and I mean, it seems like an infinite data set, but at some point, this might feel a little bit finite, but it's looking at the same images. Do you feel like that's limiting, or do you feel like that we maybe not?
It's really, I think it's massive. And then like with each, they're on release 5 right now, and every time they do a release, it changes. So if you say the word, fairy dust on V2, it's going to look very different in V5. So you have to kind of change and or keep old stuff. I mean, I even take stuff I did in V2 and rerun it in V5 and mix that in with my models and stuff. So it's really endless right now. You can hit a bit of a wall, and if and when I do, I change the subject matter. Instead of, an abandoned factory, I'll do some sort of science fiction, environment from the 60s or the 40s, or, a World's Fair type thing. Or I'll even do some people. I don't post a lot of people because, the AI is doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but if a character is compelling and sort of interesting, and if it feels like something I haven't seen before, then I'll try posting it. Like anybody can sit there and say, okay, make Conan like a Frazetta painting, and then there you go, boom. So that's uninspired and uninteresting. You have to kind of, again, just like the 3D stuff in the olden days, you have to try to figure out how to make it your own so that it's, interesting to do. I mean, and there's, to what you're saying, there's times where I'm working on, Mid-Journey, boom, 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 and then all of a sudden I'll walk away from it for like 3 weeks to a month. Like I think this past January, I have 2 renderings in my little folder that I saved because it was just hitting a wall for me. So you can hit creative walls in this as well. I think it's going to constantly evolve. Like right now, they're talking about aesthetic tests. So they'll sit there and you can take some sort of exam. I don't know what the hell it is. This is just kind of what they're talking about now. So all your idiosyncrasies, what you like, what you don't like, will be put into this sort of database thing so that your preferences will be part of what your output is. So the things that you like, so the things that you like, I like, pink sunsets, not yellow ones or whatever, but you can also talk about accidents and pencil lines and this, that, and you can really think about those beautiful paintings of the past that you've loved. It's hard to put that into words, but you can click images and you can try to come up with those explanations of why you like things. Make kind of a Dennis Allain place, a Rorschach test, and then apply that to these images and things. And now you have to be careful because they're sort of falling into the same trap. Like, people are desperate to like do the best looking cat photo there ever was in an airbrush or something. So that isn't what I want. Like sometimes as they develop these AI tools, they're trying to make like flawless paintings or images or drawings or weird caricature photography. Whereas I like the stuff that's much more impressionistic and kind of weird, and you don't see the whole picture. So right now I'm trying to keep pace with it. I'm trying to understand it. I can't say whether it's great or going to be our downfall, but along the way, I'm trying to apply the things I learned in 3D and in 2D and in Photoshop and the Wacom tablet to make sure that as I grow with it, I can keep pulling it back into what I like, my sensibilities and the things that I like. And I guess in that regard, that's why it still sort of looks like the stuff I've done over the years in the past.
Yeah. Well, when you're curating your own work, like when you have, all the
Mhm.
different outputs and stuff, are you still trying to ask the question, what are you trying to say? Because I know that that was something that you mentioned before in your work, that's something that you have in your mind. Does that kind of appear with your AI work too?
It does, but it's almost like it's kind of very it's not it's sort of image based. You want a barn, you get a barn. You want a flock of crows, you get a bunch of crows. So in the very beginning, if I sit down, if I'm inclined to open it, I'll be like, maybe I saw some really cool winter photography, and I'll be like, oh well, let's abandoned Victorian house in the wintertime. Let's see what that could look like if a person like myself were to paint that. So then I'll start asking questions, and then I'll do that for a while, a half a day or a day or whatever it is, and then you start to run out of, then they all start looking the same, and then some you might like, some you may not like, some you may take and add to it in Photoshop, but then the next day or the next week you might be interested in rusty old bridges, turn of the century. Like, so it's that kind of a thing that pushes me into doing it. Whereas like some of my older pieces in 3D, there's this one with this abandoned warehouse hallway with a huge sculpture of a woman's head, a Renaissance sculpture in the background. And then, as I'm going through it, I'm thinking what I want to say about this. I'm thinking about, like maybe I just saw The Wizard of Oz that night, the night before. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's put something in the tin that's about the Tin Man. And who played the Tin Man? Well, this guy, Ed something or other did it. So then I put, like, I'll start adding all these little Easter eggs in the drawing just to kind of keep myself entertained. And whether somebody sees it or not, doesn't matter. There's all these little things that happen that you can't do in AI yet, or, that you have to sort of apply that yourself, thinking about old and new, blah, blah, blah. That kind of thing kind of motivates you. But in terms of AI right now, you can't get that granular in the story. It's really kind of about a subject that seems interesting, an abandoned temple in a rainforest, blah, blah, blah. And then that's kind of what spurs you along, at least for me in this stuff for now.
Yeah. I want to ask you about what you think about, I guess, the ideas of styles, like people's artistic styles, and being influenced by different artistic styles. And at the same time, I guess, current copyright issues with generative AI and using other people, being influenced by other people's styles, or other people being influenced by your style and your artwork being used. Like, how do you feel about that? Or do you have any thoughts about where the boundaries might be in what you're comfortable using and stuff like that?
Well, that's an impossible question, and I
Yeah,
I feel like my answer is probably going to be different every morning. Um,
sure.
and I like, and as an example, I talked to a partner in an architectural firm, and like, so you know, why do you do what you do? And you're motivated differently every time.
Mm,
You have a firm of 300 people. Will you get up because you're worried about losing them, or you get up because you love the work, or you get up because you want to challenge? Like, so in AI, in copyright, it's like, some days it seems real scary and other days it doesn't. Like for me, I'm not going to take, a painting of Tom Schaller or of NC White and then put it in there and then tag it onto a Turner or a Morin landscape and then do that 6 times and then all of a sudden say, ta-da, look what I did.
yeah.
Now, if AI Midjourney's been trained on 10,000 paintings, and then some of that leaks into that I can't really control. And my understanding is that it's not just, it really is learning. Like it'll look at all the, Da Vinci paintings in the world and all the Rembrandts and all, and it'll try to understand what that means. It doesn't know what a sky is. It only knows what happens in the upper part of a drawing sometimes. So it's really kind of weird. I don't know where all that is. I don't know how you break it down. It's almost like a rap music. Like how do you, if somebody has a million different drum beats all layered in together, but they never touched a drum kit, I don't know how you break that apart. So, Steve McDonald is an AI guy on Instagram that I follow. I don't know him at all. He's got a huge following, and he talks a lot about ethically doing this stuff because he's gotten into people have kind of giving him a hard time on Instagram. It's not often, but sometimes. And he's like, I'm trying to make it my own. I'm trying to layer in my work on top of this stuff. It is a tool. He recognizes that, and he's still doing work that's very compelling. I've tried to take my work and dumped it into MJ, and it comes out awful. And you can even do a describe. Like you could take an image, tell it to describe it. It'll give you 4 different prompts, and I've tried all 4 of those prompts, and they look awful. They don't look like my particular cascade of prompts and blending. So that's kind of good. That gives me some hope that it's not that easily replicated. And also that's why I'm kind of trying to get out in front of it. Like I'm trying to post some of this stuff. Like, okay, this is what I've been kind of doing. And I always hashtag, AI or Midjourney in there. It's not like, oh, look what I painted this month. And so I try to be upfront about it. I try to make it my own. And time will tell. I know that you can't copyright this stuff, but I think that there's going to be, like, let's say AI gives you a sunset and then you spend a day painting over it and doing some different things. Is that yours? Yeah, I don't know. You tell me. I think so. I mean, I guess there's a certain tipping off point where it really is yours, even though there's a basis there. I don't know.
It's such an interesting question.
I can't answer it. I can only sort of just talk about it a little bit,
Yeah. No, and I think you have a really good.
I don't know if that makes any sense or that's helpful to you.
No, it does, because I find it a really interesting discussion because there's like specifics in that conversation, and there's also like theoretical. So the theoretical is a little bit like, I've read a lot about people talking about style and influences like artists over history. You're always influenced by things that you've seen. So, maybe subconsciously you're influenced. Now, if you take a specific influence, for example, if you know that like this machine is using the influences of this and this, that's more specific. But for example, I think that there are like systems where you can say, make this building look like a Zaha Hadid building, right? And it's like, it's the brand name, it's the style, but someone can also make a building looks like a Zaha Hadid building without the AI. Like it's sort of, you can be influenced, and where that kind of line I find it interesting conversation, because I feel strongly sometimes on either side of those or somewhere in between, where it's so I think your answer is interesting.
Well, you think of Sid Mead as an example, as an architect type futurist illustrator extraordinaire. Like you can say, a strange Blade Runner world like Sid Mead, and then boom, you get one. But you can't post it and go, hey, everybody, look what I just did. Sure. Like, so, and like H.R. Geiger, nobody can do that again. So there is nobody ever did H.R. Geiger before. Nobody did Sid Mead before. Now you can let some of that stuff percolate in your head as you're painting. um, some of the shapes and things. But and you can't do Frazetta, it's already been done. But I'll tell you, if you can't do something that's, never been seen before, and there's some authorship there, that's when people get excited. The people,
Yeah.
people look at, oh, look, it's me, but who cares? Like, so you need to have authorship. I mean, it's okay to post stuff like, hey, look what I did with a prompt, but there's and which definitely angers some, and I get that. But there's also, depending on how much labor or craft you really put into it, it's some of it also is like, what do you choose to show? Like, I'll have 600 drawings, but I'll only show 8 of them,
Yeah.
because this is what I want you to do. It's almost like you're curating, and that's kind of a cop out a little bit, but it's also like you're also kind of deciding what people see. And
Yeah.
so like a painter decides what people sees. And so, that's also part of the puzzle. It's not black and white. You can still do things that are compelling and nobody's ever seen before if AI helps you. I think,
Yeah.
tomorrow I might regret this recording. I don't know. I don't
I
believe that at all. I don't know.
I mean, it's
I'm
definite. It's constantly changing, isn't it?
It is. It is. And I
Yep.
think you have to, well, and that's why, this AI little journey here is, there was a while, like 2 years ago, I was really getting sick and tired of doing the same old thing. And then AI like literally started to show up. So I tried it. But there's also, my clients still hire me for what I do, and that's never going to go away. So it's kind
Yeah.
of like, there's kind of like fanboy world, and then there's, client world. There's, Instagram. I don't know a lot of art direct, although you get attention, but I still think Instagram is more of a just kind of a fan fun thing versus getting super hard leads
Yeah.
on real good paying gigs. Um,
Yeah.
for me, anyways, from a business standpoint, those really kind of still happen from word of mouth from people within that particular industry. Because I guess I am kind of a niche type of art person here, where I work in a real small sliver of bandwidth, and so that stuff I still do. I mean, I'm doing it this morning. I'm doing it right now for a few clients, few projects. So it's not really replacing for me. It's not replacing anything. And in fact, I think that was one of those sort of things we talked about the last time, was like, how does it get into your work? And like right now, it doesn't. I think at the time I used the example of, what's a date palm tree look like in Saudi Arabia? And I looked at them, and then, what's it look like when Roberts paints one? What's it look like when NC White paints one? What's it look like when, and then sort of look at them, and then, oh, so when somebody paints it, almost like when you look at a book and see a painting of something, it's like, oh, all right, that's what it would look like if NC White painted a date palm at nighttime. This is what it looked like. So then I would work on my high key paint brush strokes underneath the palm to make it feel a certain way. So I would use it almost as a study guide, not as here's an image, I'm going to cut it out and then put it in Photoshop. So,
Yeah.
and that way it's kind of a useful tool that's made its way into my work, but almost like as a reference, hey,
Yeah.
Art Deco buildings, 1941, in Brazil. And then you might get some sort of weird thing, but at least it gives you something to look at. Or like Cuba would have a lot of interesting things for Art Deco to certain era. So in that way, it's kind of a cool thing. It's no different than going to Rizzoli bookstore back in the olden days, and then or Borders Books, buying a bunch of books on postmodernism or green architecture, and then just going through them and then seeing how they make the trusses and things, and then putting it in your own work.
Yeah. Since you've been in the industry for a long time, do you feel the pressure to, on one hand, keep within your style niche that you said that you have, or do you find yourself trying to move into a certain direction to stay current or anything like that? Does that kind of influence you at all?
Yeah, well, it scares me. I don't know. I don't know what's gonna, I don't know if the phone's gonna ring tomorrow. So I'm always in this sort of world of self-doubt and what's gonna happen and peaks and valleys. Mercifully, luckily, over the past 20 years, it's worked out, right? As I still have my business. 4 years from now, 5 years from now, 2 years, 5 weeks from now, who knows? Um, my my what I strive for artistically is just more beauty. That is,
Yep.
how can I do three brushstrokes of the pen to make something look like the inside of a restaurant? And so I think one of the biggest influences in my life would be like a Craig Mullins type person. His work's so beautiful and expressive, and he can do this and have a perfect pirate silhouette in the nighttime. So all you see is a little bit, and you see a perfect pirate or something like that. Or he's doing a museum, or he's doing an opera house for Disney. He does all this stuff that's so expressive with so little brushstrokes. And so I try to chase that kind of a feel. But a lot of times when I'm hired, they like the look they've already seen.
Mhm.
But see, what's funny is they see something I see differently. Like, I can't do what I did 10 years ago. Like, I physically can't do it. Like, it'll feel like it. But when somebody goes through the catalog and says, "Oh, I want one of those," it's like, well, I paint the sky different every single time. Like, I've
Yeah.
reused the same sky maybe 6 times in the past 19 years. They're always different. So I never really know what the hell they're going to look like. It'll depend on what the music is on my stereo at the time, or my mood, or the time of year, or what another artist has painted recently that I think looks cool. Or like, if I'm in, Beijing or Saudi Arabia or Tokyo, I'll Google skies in Tokyo, look at that for an hour, and then I'll close it and go paint it. You know what I mean? Like, I try to just get into the area and then paint it. So the chase for excellence is always there from just a purely artistic standpoint. I don't really have the need, I don't think, to chase like the best software in the world. Like, my Cinema 4D for me is still just a couple of years away from the newest right now. My Photoshop is ancient. So it's really about being excellent in technique, just from a
Mm.
good old fashioned, color palette, like what looks good next to Indian yellow. Like, that's a lifetime to figure out. And that's really, really hard to do. And then the other thing that's really hard to do is when a client says, the wall here is blank concrete, go make this building look great. Well, then I have to figure out a sneaky way to artistically interpret what they picked as concrete, number 5, and then put it into a dusk shot. What does it look like when
Mm.
it's in dusk? And what does it look like when there's 10 families in front of it having the time of their lives? So for me, it's about the artwork is one thing and chasing that excellence, but also the other part of it is chasing the idea of understanding what they want, and
Mhm.
who the audience is going to be, how you're going to sell the project, how much information of the building do you show, and how little of it do you show, how do you create a place, and then being able to understand the guest experience. So when somebody comes to you with a hotel and you drop it into a park, what's it going to look like and feel like? Or an office, or a cultural center, or a town center. What's it like when people go to the ice cream shop in the evening on a Saturday after they just saw a little league game? Like, that kind of thing is what I need to think about when people come to me for the artwork, so that I really bring in that sense of place.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I'm hired because people only know that. We don't know what the building looks like, but the Little League field over here and a church over there, and it needs to be great because I got to show them something next Friday. And so I kind of build a narrative often sometimes very, very little, and then try to paint it in an expressive way. And then, ta-da, that's the product. So that's kind of what I do. And so I'm not chasing a technology or anything like that. I'm just chasing how you build that narrative in a compelling way. And how do you
Yeah.
understand when a client tells you something, how can you instantly know it over the phone or these days on a 10-minute Zoom call so that they trust you? Because I'm always just like this head halfway across the world telling them about what I think might be happening or what might be a good scene or environment to put their project in.
Yeah. Do you feel like with advancements of new technologies and softwares over time, the thing that doesn't change is the communication with clients and
Yeah.
the understanding of the meaning?
Yeah, because I think Nerfs is cool, point clouds is cool, like all that stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with all that, but I kind
Yep.
of watch that stuff.
Yep.
Grammary,
Mm.
I don't know. That kind of
Photogrammetry. Yeah.
stuff. That is awesome. I'm a huge Sketchfab guy. I think that stuff's all cool. And in fact, back to process, I'll go through Sketchfab and I see an old rotten wheelbarrow stuck in the mud. All of a sudden, that sparks an idea, and I'll take that wheelbarrow that's stuck in the mud, I'll put it in the foreground, then do some sort of interesting barn in the background. Like, so sometimes a small piece influences the whole, and vice versa. Sometimes the whole influences that tiny little story that's happening in the foreground. But so to answer your question, it's like that's where the technology sometimes helps me, like photo mapping or, Sketchfab with a cool scan of an awesome object. Or if I have like an iPhone 14 or 15, I'll be able to scan. Maybe I can scan a vase or an object or a piece of wood or something, scan it, and then make that a piece of driftwood in a scene somewhere. Like, so in that regard, our AI, in that regard, technology helps me. But in terms of the storytelling and stuff, people are people and they respond to environments kind of the same. So technology helps me and I kind of keep an eye on it, but I couldn't tell you, I don't have a subscription to the latest software and I don't overly chase software rendering packages and things like that because it's not, it's just not something that I need. I don't need like instantaneous feedback on my lighting. It's cool and the lighting now is beautiful, but I would contend the only important thing with terms of technology, it's just the way they treat lighting, the bounce, that daytime, the night, the move, especially on interiors. I think that's a big deal. But it's really about making my style better and better. And just having some sort of knowledge on what technology is.
Yeah. I have one last question for you before we wrap up. Do you think it's important to stay curious in this field?
Well, yeah, because then you're going to get stale. I mean, I'm the ripe old age of 56. I've been doing this now for a while, and I still hope I have more to say. I mean, maybe I worry that I'll run out of things to say, but there's always something that strikes you. You'll see an image, you'll see a thumbnail, and then you think it's something, then you zoom in and it's something completely different. So then you zoom back out again. You use that to inspire what you thought you were seeing, like a great, the Crystal Palace or something like that. It ends up being something totally different. So yeah, you want to stay curious and you want to keep exploring. And that's what this AI stuff's been kind of helping me do on the side, because you can also do it quickly while you're stuck doing, work. But my sense is you want to stay curious so you're still interested. If you're still interested, you'll still be invested. And the only way you can help a client is if you're invested in their work and they reciprocate because they're excited about what you bring to the table. And so it keeps going. So, for the foreseeable future, I hope to stay curious. I think that's important. And it's self-gratifying and it'll help you, keep advancing in your own projects, your own profession.
Yeah, that's a great place to end it. Thank you so much, Dennis. It's been a really interesting conversation. I feel like there's been a lot to take away. Yeah, it's great. Thank you so much.
I had fun. Thank you so much.
Me too.
Bye now. Thank you.